I started that question with myself. Last week I did a monologue/podcast here, and I'm going to do one more and continue this. I told you in the last episode where your hours have been going. And I want to be careful today because there's a way to hear a teaching like this and walk out of the room heavier, feeling like you're just weighted down, like there's no hope. That's not what any of this is for. If all I've done is give you a better vocabulary for the fact that you've lost 4 years, I've cost you something and handed you nothing. So today is the other half. Today is what comes back. And something does come back. I need you to hear that. And I need you to hear that from me, a man who got time back. Not from somebody who read about it. Not from somebody who heard about it. But from somebody who lives it. Let me start with why your hours cost what they do. Because it's not the work. I mean, that's the first thing people get wrong. And it sends them off fixing the wrong problem for 10 years. And they look at a life that's draining them and they start cutting tasks. Fewer commitments, lighten the calendar. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying home. And some of that is fine and some of that is overdue. But a year later, they're just as empty on a smaller schedule and now they have less life and the same exhaustion. And they conclude that something must be wrong with them. Nothing is wrong with them. They were charged for something that never appeared on the bill. And here's what it is. Holding up a version of yourself costs energy. Not at the moment of performance, continuously, in the background, the entire time you're anywhere near anyone who knows the version. Okay? You're monitoring how you're landing. You're running a small, ongoing calculation about what can be said in this room, what can be said to this person, at this level of honesty. You're managing the distance between what you actually think and what you've already established that you think. And that distance has to be maintained because if it collapses in front of somebody, the whole arrangement is exposed. And none of that I just described is conscious after the first few years. And that's exactly why it never shows up on the ledger. You've never once experienced life without it. You have no baseline. So the call simply reads as the ordinary price of being alive, but it's not. It's not. It's the price of being somebody. And I think that is the mechanism behind those hours that you've had that could never repeat on purpose, right? I mean, anyway, you see what I'm saying? You know the ones. You were working on something, talking with somebody, doing nothing in particular. But time was different. Time behaved differently. So it wasn't faster. It stopped being a thing you were spending. And at the end, you were not empty, which is the part that stayed with you because you've been working, and working is supposed to cost. And you've tried to arrange for more of those, but it didn't work. And it did not work because you went at it as a scheduling problem, but it's not a scheduling problem. Nothing special was happening to you in those hours. Something had temporarily stopped happening. The performance dropped, usually because there was nobody there to perform for, and all the energy that maintains it came back at once like a flood. And you experienced that as time behaving strangely. No one itemized it. You just thought you got lucky. So when the performance goes down for good rather than by accident, what comes back arrives in an order. And I want to give you the order because the first part is easy to miss, and people quit before the rest of it shows up. They quit early before payday. The first thing that comes back is attention, your focus. You'll notice you can stay with something a little bit easier. You can stay with one thing, and you'll credit it to sleep or a change in your schedule. Important things, right? Or to finally getting on top of something. And it's none of that, though. A large share of your attention had a standing assignment somewhere else, and it just got reassigned. Energy then, so your attention is first and then energy is second. And that one confuses people because nothing changed about their diet or their rest, and they go looking for a physical explanation. And then the strange one, people say their days have gotten longer. And I've heard it described almost word for word by people who have never met each other. Nothing changed about the length of anything. They just stopped losing 5 hours a day to a conversation with somebody who was not in the room. So how do you know where you are? You don't need an instrument for this. There are 6 markers, and none of them require interpretation. You are located where your body is. You are not thinking about the afternoon while you sit through the morning. Something exists at the end of that did not exist at the beginning. And that is the plainest test, and it forgives nothing. Sentences, a repaired thing, a conversation that actually went somewhere, a decision genuinely made. It does not have to be impressive. It has to be there. I mean, effort compounds instead of resetting. What you did last week is still standing this week, and you're building on top of it rather than starting again from the same place. I mean, that is the clearest single difference between the two kinds of time. And you can feel it in your chest on a Monday. You're in contact with people rather than managing that relationship and contact. And both of you, if it's another person, feel it immediately. It's the difference between a conversation and a transaction conducted in a friendly voice. The work is work you would still claim if nobody else found out you did it. And rest actually makes you feel rested. I mean, watch that one the closest, right? It's the only one that is binary. Either you stood up with more than you sat down with, or you didn't. Now, I've got to separate this from the thing it's going to get mistaken for. And in a culture like ours, the mistake is almost automatic. This is not productivity. Productivity asks how much can be fitted into this hour. And it treats the hour like a container, and it has no opinion whatsoever about whether the contents belong to you. This is different. And it frequently runs the other direction. A man in alignment often does less, considerably less, because a great deal of what was on the calendar was holding up a picture rather than building a life. And it comes out the moment the picture stops being defended. The measure is not volume. The measure is whether the hour left anything behind. And that is why I will not present these two as a balance to be struck. One steals your life, the other multiplies it. An hour of the second kind does not simply pass and end. It puts something down that keeps working after the hour is over. In the relationship, in the work, in the person that you were sitting with. I mean, you can be asleep and it's still compounding. Now somebody is listening to this and they're thinking, man, this sounds like a luxury. This is a dream come true. What kind of fantasy are you writing over here, Tippins? And that is fine for a man with room in his life. And, I understand you might have some margin, but you don't have room because you have obligations that are not going anywhere. I want to take that seriously because it is usually true, right? You do have obligations. Children are real, the mortgage is real, the person you're caring for is real, and none of it is going to reorganize itself around teaching about time and listen to a man talk about time that doesn't exist for you. But notice that I have not asked you to remove a single one of them. Everything I have described happens inside the same obligations, the same hours, the same Tuesday. The tax I'm talking about is not charged by your responsibilities. It's charged by the version of yourself you're holding up while you're carrying them. And you can put a child to bed as a man performing patience or a woman performing patience, or you can put a child to bed. The task is the same. What it costs you is not. And if you're under so much weight right now that even this feels like one more thing, hear me say plainly that you should not be excavating anything this week. You should not be digging. Something underneath acute load needs reinforcing before it needs digging. That's not avoidance and it's not failure. That's the correct order. And I'd tell you the same thing sitting across a table if you were here with me in my study. Let me tell you how I know this. Because I would rather show you than argue it. I got free in April of 2023, 1 month before I turned 49. Then I stayed in the pastorate almost 3 more years, and I left this past winter, 29 years in. So for those 3 years, I stood in the same room on the same mornings, doing the same work in front of many of the same people. From where you were sitting, nothing would have looked different. Same man, same hour, same building. Everything was different. Because for 26 of those years, every one of those mornings was evidence, filed continuously in a case for whether I was fit to be in the room. And for the last 3 years, it was simply work I wanted to do, done by a man who already knew what he was before he walked in the building. I want you to sit with that because it is the whole point, and I cannot make it any plainer. The circumstances did not change, and that's just one area of life. Not the job, not the calendar, not the people, not the one obligation on the list. The source changed, and the source was the only thing that had ever been the problem. So if you're waiting for your life to clear before any of this becomes available to you, it's not going to clear, and it does not have to, which brings me to the question people always ask, which is, how do I get more of it? And the honest answer is that the question is shaped incorrectly, and I'd be doing you a great disservice to answer it as asked. You cannot allocate this. It is not a category of activity, and there is no arrangement of your calendar that produces it, which is why blocking out time for what matters so often leaves you with blocked out hours that feel exactly like all the others. The hour did not change. You brought the same performance to it, and it's a consequence, not a practice. It shows up when what you do starts coming out of what you actually are instead of aiming at what you're trying to be. And it shows up in proportion to how much of that has become true. No technique will produce it ahead of that. And I have never once seen it, and I have watched a great many people try, which means the road runs through the unglamorous part and there is no way around it. Find out what is actually there. Stop holding up what is not. The hours follow. They have always followed. You have not been short on time. You have been paying a tax that nobody ever itemized for you. And you have been paying it since you were young enough that you do not remember agreeing to it. Stop paying it. And I think you're going to find when you do that, you were never as poor as you thought. I'm James. This is Unbound.